Our next speaker, you will be hard-pressed to find anyone who is more deeply entrenched in the inner workings of Nashville than our next speaker. If I were to name all of the ministries and social and civic organizations that Brenda Haywood has served and continues to serve in here in Nashville, we would be here for a long time. But let me name a few. Brenda is a Nashville native. She is a Nashville City Councilwoman for District 3. She's an ordained minister and a retired Nashville Metro Schools teacher and administrator. She has degrees from Tennessee State University, Trevecca, Nazarene College, and Vanderbilt. She's also the founder and CEO of Royal Heirs Youth Academy, which is a nonprofit that aims to empower our youth through awareness, education, information, mentorship, and community resources. In addition, that organization is designed to effectively satisfy the classes and community service hours that are assigned to at-risk juveniles through the juvenile court system. And so I'm thankful to have Brenda with us this evening to speak on the topic of at-risk youth from an educator's perspective. Please welcome Brenda Haywood.
Thank you. First of all, I consider it an honor and a pleasure to stand before you tonight. Sissy was so awesome, and I know I can do this. In part, 9 minutes doesn't seem like a long time, but as you think about it, it's time enough to get your point across. I like to say that after being in the educational profession for probably 30 years, I asked my kids to pick a poem that really spoke to who they were. And I'd like to read this poem to you. It's called Society's Child. And then I'd like to tell you a little parable. It says, there is something inside trying to get out. It is banging and screaming and raging. It wants to be in control, in demand, clawing and scratching and bombarding the walls that keep it entrapped. There's something inside trying not to wither. It wants to stay alive and thrive. It's getting so tired of being locked away deep down inside. There's something inside that is surviving by one thought and one thought alone, that it will be free someday when I am no longer afraid to be me. These young people, they're called at risk. What I found out that all kids in one way or another are at risk. And let me tell you what defies the term at risk. I tell my kids, if you're not loving, you're not living. You have to be able to impart the love of God when it comes to the young people. And people often ask me, why did you start this organization? Well, I'm going to tell you why I started the organization. It's because I was called to teach at a school for kids that had been expelled from all of Metro City schools. They were called at-risk kids. As I taught them, they would tell me, Miss Haywood, no one loves us. We have come from broken homes. We come from a broken society. Everything about us is broken. Well, I knew then I had to be a change agent. I had to love these kids into what God had purposed for them. I told them that they were royal heirs, that God had a plan and a purpose for each and every one of them. I told them once they went home to read Jeremiah 29:11, it talked about what God had planned for them. We couldn't talk about it in school because everything that had to do with Jesus, everything that it had to do with religion was removed from school. I'm going to tell you about the home I was brought up in. I had a wonderful mom and a wonderful father. But at the age of 12 in 1963, I found myself taken from the setting that I had been nurtured in from K through 4. I was thrust into Stratford High School. Well, at that time, it was 7th through 12th grade. I was the only black in the school. When I walked in, there was Mr. Webb. And if I had to take a subject for my little speech today, my 9 minutes, it would be my white daddy. When I walked into Stratford, I walked up the stairs, and there was a white guy about 35 years old with what I thought was a halo over his head. When I walked in, he says, "How are you?" I says, "How would you be?" I'm 12 years old. It's 1963. There are 2,000 kids here, and I'm the only black. He said, "It's going to be all right." Well, I didn't believe that. And this wasn't a part of what I was going to say tonight, but I'm trying to convey, if you're not loving, you're not living, and you have to love a child out of that child's brokenness. Because all kids come to you with their culture and their circumstance, and oftentimes there is more brokenness over here than it is over here. You have to love them out of their brokenness. And I learned that through my white daddy. There I found myself in a strange land, a land that was quite unusual for me. I had come from a land of love. Now I'm in a land of a lot of hatreds. But there was my white daddy that felt like if he wasn't loving, he wasn't living. And each and every day he came to me and he says, "How are you doing today?" I said, "Today I'm a little less unhappy than I was yesterday." So each day he would make it his business to come and love on me in the Mr. Webb kind of way. Eventually I found out that it didn't matter what color you were. It didn't matter what size you were. It didn't matter what age you were. If you were not loving, you were not living. When I became an adult after graduating from Stratford High School, and he loved me all the way through, and I became a teacher. At that point, I knew how to love my kids out of a tendency to want to kill themselves. I learned to love my kids out of a tendency to want to cut themselves. I learned to love my kids out of a place where they thought they were less than someone else that may not have looked like them. I learned how to love my kids into a place that God had prepared for them. And I learned that primarily through my white daddy, because coming from the home that I came from, love was such a natural thing. Then when I became a minister, I taught my kids even more how to love from a godly perspective. And as kids would come to me and say, "Miss Haywood, I don't want to go to the other classes." And I says, "Why not?" They said, "Because they don't love us like you do." Finally, I retired and I started preaching, and I ran into my white daddy and I invited him to something that I was having, to learn that he had a heart attack and he died before he could come. He was 84 in 2014. Oh my God, when I think about they called me and told me he had died. And they said, "Brenda, we have something that we need you to do." And that's what they told me, that they wanted me to eulogize my white daddy. They said he didn't want his pastor to eulogize him. He wants you to eulogize him. If I had to leave you with one message, it is the only way you can find yourself living is if you find yourself loving. So from an educator's perspective, the only thing I can tell you, if you have the privilege to be in the face of a child that is at risk, you love him into a place of wholeness. Thank you.